A reading from Genesis chapter 37. They saw Joseph from a distance, and before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." Word of God, word of life.
To Pastor Jenny and Reverend Samuel and all those who are responsible for my being here, I am deeply honored and touched by this invitation and grateful to share with the Lutheran community on this day. It's my first time on this campus, and I believe my first time in a Lutheran pulpit, but I thank you so much for allowing me the deep honor to share on this very special and solemn occasion. I'm grateful again to the members of my church family, the Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church, for their presence on this day. When I was 18 years old, my father drove me to Atlanta, Georgia, began to help me move into my freshman dormitory, and as we were lifting luggage up the stairwells, the resident advisors told us to slow down and walk with reverence, for indeed we were moving into the dorm where Martin Luther King Jr. lived and studied. Since then, his legacy has cast a great shadow over my life, and I'm grateful for all that his legacy means to our world and to me personally. And I will admit that I cannot do anything of his life justice in the time that's allotted to me today, but I pray that throughout the course of this weekend, we all may be intentional about reflecting on his words and on his wisdom. That being said, there are some words that I pray will offer some texture for this moment that we find ourselves in January 2024. Allow me again to read just that 20th verse of Genesis chapter 37. "Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. And then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." Thus far, the word of God. Beloved, this timeless story of Joseph and his brothers reminds us that dreams have their consequences. It's not easy to carry great hope in your heart. For while the dreamer might be inspired to believe in monumental change, most people have a strong preference for the status quo. So dreamers are often met with contempt and violence by those who have no desire to see a new world emerge. These brothers resented Joseph's dream so much that the text says they conspired to kill him. The imaginative musings of a 17-year-old were too much for them to bear, so they made arrangements to kill him and throw him in a pit. What a rude awakening to find out that your dreams would lead to your downfall. But there are pitfalls that come along with dreaming, for indeed the act of dreaming itself unsettles the insecurities of those who do not have imaginative capacity. And indeed, when those individuals feel like a dream might lead to their displacement, they take up arms to protect the world that they know from becoming the world that you are dreaming about. Dreams have their consequences. And so this weekend, we pause to celebrate a dreamer who wasn't that much older than Joseph when he began to proclaim his radiant vision for America. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., at 26 years of age, began a ministry that would radically change the soul of the nation over the next 13 years. From his pulpit in Montgomery, Alabama, he sought to redeem the South and offer a new trajectory for a broken country. We will always remember the dream that he shared on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. In perhaps what was the greatest speech of the 20th century, Dr. King urged this nation to finally live into the spirit of the Emancipation Proclamation. And he illustrated his hope for an oasis of freedom and justice, where all of God's children could sing of the gift of liberty. But it's also worth noting that along with his dream, Dr. King carried a cautious realism. And 4 years after the I Have a Dream speech, he declared that his dream had become a nightmare. In 1967, he offered this description of what it meant to be black in America. He said that being a Negro in America means trying to smile when you want to cry. It means trying to hold on to physical life amid psychological death. It means the pain of watching your children grow up with clouds of inferiority in their mental skies. It means having your legs cut off and then being condemned for being a cripple. It means being harried by day and haunted by night by a nagging sense of nobodiness and constantly fighting to be saved from the poison of bitterness. It means the ache and the anguish of living in so many situations where hopes unborn have died. Dr. King was well aware of the psychological turmoil of his people, and yet till his dying day, he still held on to the peculiar hope that one day the Negro would get to the promised land. He dreamed of a land with economic opportunity, equitable distribution of resources, reverence for human dignity. But white America was not ready for such a world to emerge. So instead of embracing his vision, they conspired to murder him, because dreams have their consequences. After years of FBI surveillance, countless bomb threats, and a stabbing attempt, it was one singular bullet through the cheek, fracturing the jaw, that left Dr. King bleeding out on that motel balcony. Sister Amber, the autopsy report at St. Joseph's Hospital in Memphis revealed that Dr. King's heart was in the condition of a 60-year-old rather than a 39-year-old man. And all of King's colleagues agreed that it was the stress of his work that aged him so rapidly, because it's hard to carry a dream while you're still living in a nightmare. For these last 55 years, we've had to grapple with the enormity of the gift that was lost on that day. What more would he have been able to do for the movement, for the country, for his family, had the dreamer been allowed to live? What brilliant eloquence and prophetic insight were we robbed of that day? We lost so much the day the dreamer was thrown in the pit. But the frightening reality is that we are at risk of losing even more. This holiday is more urgent than ever because we are sitting in a cultural moment where people are actively working to sanitize the American story. People are so threatened by notions of diversity, equity, and inclusion that they are attempting to erase the history that makes progress a necessity. If we are not careful, we can fall into the trap of allowing our children to grow up in a world where they don't know about this great dreamer or his efforts to shape a better America. We have to be careful to not allow the right to erase our stories or twist them to a point where they are so far from the truth that they no longer have the capacity to help anybody. This is the pitfall we must be wary of. For indeed, the problem we witness today is the same danger we read about in Genesis 37. Pastor Jenny, what's more disturbing than the fact that they conspired to kill the dreamer is the fact that they felt compelled to lie about it. Come now, let us kill him, throw him into one of the pits, and then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him. Murder is one thing, but storytelling is the more sinister exercise. Because by creating this tale, the brothers were deciding that they wanted to do the deed, but they didn't want any blood on their hands. They knew they wanted the dreamer taken out of here, but they didn't have the courage necessary to be honest about their own violent proclivities. And this is the sickness corrupting the soul of America today. We are lying about who we are so we can preserve the silly idea of our innocence. Creating fictional tales because we don't have the fortitude to face factual moments. It's one thing to destroy the dreamer. It's a whole other issue to not even be able to look yourself in the mirror and admit why the dream frightened you so much in the first place. This is the real pitfall, the real hazard of our society, that we would slaughter and then make up a story. That we would sin and then go tell God how blessed we are from sea to shining sea. Until this nation is able to grapple with its failures, we will continue to slaughter the very people who might be able to save its soul. We have to be mature enough to swallow the whole truth, even when it's not tasty. Beloved, I am open to debating a lot of things, but I refuse to debate history. I refuse to not acknowledge the fact that this country was built by stolen people on stolen land. I refuse to ignore how the laws of this nation were shaped to only protect landowning white men. I refuse to ignore this nation's repeated cruelty towards immigrants. From Eastern Europeans to Asian Americans to our Muslim sisters and brothers to those precious persons who are seeking asylum on our border right now. I refuse to turn a blind eye towards sexism and not see the stain of wage inequality that's still staring us in the face. And I certainly refuse to give ear to anybody who wants to deny the reality of slavery or the Holocaust. Shame on people who are too ignorant to see the consequences of their absurd claims. We must live in our truth. We must live in our truth, even when that truth is violent, even when that truth is embarrassing, even when that truth is shameful. However we feel about it, erasure is not the option. For there can be no healing without honesty. And this democracy can never be all that it could be if we continue to make up stories about how we got here. Honesty is the birthplace of healing. And we must remember that we can never be all that we hope to be until we have wrestled with all of who we used to be. Joseph's brothers said, "Come now, let us kill him, throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." It's a difficult verse to read, but the good news in that story comes right in that final statement. They planned their lie, and then with confidence they said, "And we'll see what shall become of his dreams." They thought that throwing him in the pit would eliminate the irritation caused by his divine inspiration. But eventually those brothers had to learn that you can knock a person into the pit, but that won't kill the hope that's in their hearts. Because the truth is, dreams don't die, they multiply. And you can destroy the dream, but the dream will live on. Because the dream never belonged to the dreamer in the first place, it belonged to God. And God has a way of recycling the inspiration that one generation refused to hear and using that to water springs of hope in future generations to come. They declare, "And we shall see what will happen of his dreams." And sure enough, years later, it was Joseph's dreams that catapulted him to being the most successful and influential person in all of Egypt. And I am sure that those who plotted Dr. King's demise thought that they would eliminate his influence and his voice. But they couldn't see that years later, this holiday will become a megaphone for his words and his wisdom. Indeed, Dr. King said it best, "Truth crushed to the earth will rise again. For the dreams that God grants to us have not the power to go down and lie dormant, but indeed they will always have the resilience to come back to life." May we always remember that even if they destroy the dreamer, the dream will live on. God bless you.